Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast. And it's my pleasure to have Edan Haddock on board with me today. Edan, we've been trying to get this up and running for ages. I think I start every podcast that way now. I think every guest I have on, I'm so desperate to have them on, but we're trying to find times to get them on. So it is a real pleasure to have you with us today. Edan, for the people listening, maybe you could give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. And James, I'm so glad we have finally connected. It has been an ongoing conversation between us, and I'm a big fan of your work, and really, really lovely to be here on the podcast. So thank you so much for having me. A little bit about me. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. All of my professional career has been here in Melbourne, Australia. Really, what I do is I'm a head of talent. I work for Movember, which is the men's health charity organisation that you'll be familiar with in the UK as well, because there's quite a lot of cool stuff happening over there. And in addition to that, I run an online recruitment and talent acquisition community, which is called Rubber Band. But I've been around a long time. I've been in the recruitment game for far too long. I'm one of the old fellas here in Melbourne.
And are you like a lot of people that you describe as you just fell into recruitment, right? Was it a kind of a conscious decision?
Well, I started dating a recruiter. That's how it all came about, right? And I was in a very different industry. I was a florist until I was 30. I met my partner, Jason. He's another recruiter. He's ex-UK, but he's here in Melbourne now. I met him when I was 24. I continued floristry for 6 years, and global financial crisis. I just didn't really know where to go and what to do. And he was obviously very well networked in the agency world. And someone said, hey, you know what? Maybe Edan will be good at this as well. He'll know all the right people just based on his relationship with Jason. So, yeah, I did fall into it and really fell in love with it very quickly. Being able to bring the experience of, being self-employed and running a commercial business for such a long time in my 20s, and then being able to, I suppose, set up a recruitment business. That's what managing an agency desk is, right? I mean, you're running a P&L at the end of the day, and all of those kind of skills and all the people skills that I developed, the business acumen that I developed, it just all flowed really beautifully for me, and I've never looked back.
I'm going to ask the question I think probably a lot of people listening are also wanting me to ask is, what's it like being at home with two recruiters?
Well, that's actually when I set up Rubber Band was around the time of lockdown. That was the hard time with two recruiters when we were both at home. And at the time we were living in, a lot of your listeners probably are familiar with St Kilda. It's quite a well-known part of Melbourne on the coast, but we were living in what I would describe as a flat. I wouldn't describe it even as an apartment. So we were on top of each other on the phone, making a lot of noise 24/7 for that period. And Melbourne had that historically long lockdown period as well. So yeah, it was quite an adventure.
But Edan, obviously I've got you on to talk about a couple of things today. We're going to, I want to just kind of get your perspective on the TA space in your part of the world. We're going to talk a little bit about Rubber Band, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of Movember as well, because I think it's an important charity to discuss.
Oh, wonderful.
But if we kick off with kind of your perspective on the kind of TA space as it is in kind of Australasia, because in comparison, the UK, it's been a difficult year, right? In the TA space, a lot of kind of TAs, really good TAs, have kind of lost their jobs, downsizing of teams, etc. What's your kind of perspective from down under?
Look, I echo that. Down under, really, really tough. I would say 18 months to almost 2 years. I think when we came out of the tech startup boom where recruiters were, I mean, our REMs were inflated even, that we were very, very hard to come by. There were a lot of startups that were scaling at a rapid pace and they couldn't keep up and they needed more recruiters. I think, we've gone through exactly what the UK and the US and other markets have gone through, right? We've had really significant numbers in terms of redundancies, particularly at a leadership level. What's happening at the moment, which makes me feel quite optimistic, but I think the role of a talent acquisition professional is really evolving and changing. And what we're seeing is, after all of those restructures and redundancies, that organizations are now bringing talent back to the forefront, but the role of a talent acquisition leader, director, head of, manager, whatever it might be defined as, is no longer what it was. And it's very much focused on talent management. You know, we see the expectations of the people that they're hiring, and this is exactly what's happened in my role. They've brought me in. I'm not just looking after talent acquisition. I'm looking after succession. I'm doing the 9-box. You know, I'm looking at our flight risk, our role criticality. I'm doing workforce planning. I think that's the direction it's going in. Some people say, oh, it's all around talent advisory. I think it's beyond that. I think it's really, beyond mobility as well. They're looking at people that can take a real deep dive into their total workforce and a total view of talent, build internal and external pipelines, and really be the people that drive the development of those skills and those capabilities and competencies that they're trying to build to future-proof their business. So the role is really shifting, but I think there's a lot of people perhaps haven't had that experience because we've always been in centre of excellence. And I was fortunate in being in a position with an organisation that was much smaller. So it was more of a HR management role that I'd been in the past. So I knew all of that in succession. I'd had that experience. I think a lot of our talent acquisition leaders don't. And that's where I think the struggle is going to be. Do they hire an OD person or do they hire a talent acquisition person? Which one holds the most weight?
And is this something you've kind of spotted over the last kind of, let's say, 5 years? The role of TA has just basically grown, right, and become way more expanded to cover elements of the business that probably weren't even being considered or kind of maybe 5 years ago. And is this a pressure on people within TA to become more like that as well? Is that the way you now get a role in TA, because you've got to have way more strings to your bow, which what you didn't have to have maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it does add pressure. I think the challenge is, and this is going to sound a little bit lame, sorry listeners, but the challenge is we've kind of always done talent acquisition the same way. The only advancement has really been the technology that enables us to do it more effectively. When it comes to talent management, and I have to say probably 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't even have visibility of that. The succession plans just weren't, that's confidential. That's for the business partnering and OD team. The recruiters don't need to know that kind of information. So we do need to upskill, and we have to upskill really quickly in order to future-proof our profession, I feel. There are other elements that you can get exposure to that I think will really assist you in that as well. And some of those are, we're seeing talent leaders being responsible for REM management. We have full transparency of gender pay gaps now. So a lot of the blame of those gaps was landed squarely on the recruiters, right? So there's a lot more opportunity now for talent acquisition teams to be involved in REM strategy, being able to design roles, being able to evaluate roles. We're seeing a lot of people that are going through the accreditation to be able to do that because it's now visible, right? We can't have, inequity in our REM and in our pay within our organisations without it, being public now. It's published once a year.
And
that's
also,
quite significant change.
Is that something that there's now no longer the purview of larger businesses, but smaller businesses have now kind of taken all this kind of on board as well? I mean, because it used to be that only really big businesses or businesses that were scaling fast would have TA teams and have to worry about this kind of stuff. But is it now that you're seeing the smaller businesses are much, startups are really taking this into consideration because they know it's going to do them right in the future, I guess.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. It's across the board. I mean, that it's not just big business that are reporting on it. It's every organisation of 100 employees or more within
Yeah.
Australia. So
Yeah.
it's not small business, but and that's significant. And media attention comes along with that as well.
Of course.
We've been able to self-regulate for for all time, right? We've been a HR industry that self-regulates, but we've done an appalling job of it. So the government has intervened. So fun and games, and what could come? What could be the next step in that? Is it going to be beyond gender? Are we going to need to report on other? Whether it's our Indigenous representation within our organisations, there's so many facets to it that we don't know what may come, just because we haven't done a good job in the past, really.
And just picking up on a point you made earlier around kind of technology, how is tech kind of influencing these kind of changes? And is this really, I always steer clear of the word AI and things like that, but I guess you can't get away from that now, really.
Yeah, no, you can't. I think what I'm hearing, and this has been talked about quite a lot in the Rubber Band networking group. We went through this phase of best of breed and doing integrations. I think people and organizations are exhausted by it, and we're seeing this return to the one, the one platform, and we're seeing organizations really that have had things plugged in, unplugging them. I know of an organisation that had a really whiz bang AI ATS talent marketplace plugged into Workday, and 3 years later they got rid of it and they're doing everything in Workday. Like, we're seeing this return to simplicity, and then I suppose what happens there is it's great for the employee experience. It's not necessarily great for the talent acquisition team's experience nor the candidate experience. So we're having to be a little bit more creative and going back to having our, sometimes recruitment's kind of tacked on the end of these platforms, right? And it's not as whiz bang as we want it to be. So we're having to be a little bit more creative in how we manage that experience.
And you mentioned obviously Rubber Band, so let's kind of pick that up, because this is your network of kind of TA and recruiters, down under, but it's a bit broader than that now, from my understanding. How did that all start?
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right. Everyone's welcome to join Rubber Band, no matter what region they're in. It's it's for everyone, and we all learn from each other. But yeah, I mentioned, so that was during lockdown here in Melbourne. We had a ridiculously long lockdown, the longest in the world, which was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We even had curfews, the works, for a very long period of time. At the time as well, it was another moment where we were seeing, people having to stand down from their roles, or roles becoming redundant because hiring wasn't happening. Again, another benefit of future-proofing and moving into total talent. But anyway, all of that was happening, and I just set up a Facebook group for my friends just to check in on everyone. I was fortunate to still have work. My role wasn't impacted, but a lot of my close friends, it was. So I just went through my Facebook friends and all the recruiters. I pulled together probably about 20. Then they started pulling their friends together and their networks together, and it just kind of organically snowballed. It became what's getting close to 2,000 recruiters now. So it's very big. We were very conscious of making sure it was all inclusive. So it's not just for internal, it's for agency as well. And there's very much a mutual respect there, that we, it's not a salesy environment, and we don't do any agency bashing or anything like that in there. It's very respectful, and yeah, it's amazing. It's one of those things that was very organic. I think it's working well. A lot of people early on said, "Oh, Eden, you need to put it into Slack, or you need to put it into a different platform, because people don't like Meta, and I don't want to be talking to professionals within Facebook." But yeah, I think the really great thing about it is that you can be in there and you're being yourself and you're not representing your organization. And I think that's why it took off and why we're getting so much traction, so much growth, and so much activity in there. It's an incredibly active group. And I
It is
don't
indeed.
really
I know.
guide it
I'm
anymore.
a member. I'm a member. I
Yeah.
know how I know how active. But so kind of maybe kind of give us a little kind of window into what goes on kind of rubber band. What are the kind of hot topics, the kind of things that people are kind of chatting about without obviously going into too much detail because you want to kind of respect people's kind of that they maybe want to keep some of this stuff to themselves. But what are the hot topics kind of going on in the group at the minute?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the hot topic, but a really active chat at the moment is, HR job seekers and vacancies. So we're finding people work in there, which is great. People are going in there and saying, hey, I've got a vacancy. I'm not going to advertise it. I know there's a lot of people looking. Let me know if you're interested. There's all of that going on. There's definitely a lot around HR services, tech, and even agency recommendations as well.
Right.
Because we trust each other. No one takes a commission. I don't take a commission. It's not one of those kind of groups. So, recommendations are very critical. But I think most importantly, it's a place to go in there and just say, do you know what? I'm having a really terrible time at the
You can
moment.
say shit there. You can say you can
Yeah,
swear on here.
I can.
You're
Yeah, I
right.
don't swear on my podcast, so I was trying to show the
It's
same
fine.
respect to others.
You can swear on here. So it's all right. It's all right.
Oh,
Don't worry.
fantastic! But it is, yeah. I'm having a shit time.
Yeah.
I just had a placement pull out. It's the only one I had. The chief marketing officer is ready to kill me. Can anyone help me? Does anyone know anyone? I'm lost, or I'm really fed up with my ATS. Does anyone know how to fix it? I can't get through to them. All of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In the moment,
Yeah.
jump in there.
But it's interesting. You mentioned that there's kind of people advertising for kind of HR kind of roles. So I guess that actually that's a good barometer for the state of play in the space. If
Mm.
and especially I assume it must be the majority of people are kind of Australia based. So that things are moving forward. That people are feeling a bit more confident to hire hire teams and again, right? So that's
Mm.
encouraging, right?
Yeah, we're seeing it. I think now that, as I mentioned, organizations have reset the expectation of what their talent leaders are doing, that means that they're building teams below them or beside them. And, we'll start seeing that growth because organizations need to focus on talent. That's not going to go away, whether they're hiring or not. And yeah, but I'm really optimistic of what 2025 is going to bring, regardless of, I won't get into politics and things like that, but regardless of what's going on in the world politically, and, we've got wars, we've got all sorts going on, we've got a economic crisis, really, we've got high cost of living, and yeah, but I am optimistic about our industry. I think we're seeing that recovery, and I think we are going to see growth in organisations.
And I guess you're in a great
The
position.
economy has to recover, right? It has to.
Well, yeah, it can't kind of bubble along the bottom for so long, right? So,
yeah.
And I guess you're in a perfect position because you've got 2,000 people within that space who will know if businesses are hiring, which is the first element of growth, right? When businesses feel confident enough to grow and hire, then the economy is obviously going in the right direction again, and you're perfectly placed to see that.
Absolutely, and I think because we're saying that it's highly competitive at the moment, so a lot of people are feeling down because you are competing against a lot of people because we saw such a significant drop in opportunity and such a significant amount of people impacted by what happened and what is still continuing to happen, but not to the degree it was. We've just got to get through and just soldier through because I think those opportunities will come. We're not going to see the boom that we saw during the tech startup boom. That's never going to happen, but I think we will recover to where we were prior.
Yeah. And before I let you go, Edan, let's talk about Movember. It's a great charity. I've done it previously in the past. I'm not doing it this year because I have a permanent moustache. So I have a fear because my understanding is you have to shave it off and start again, which I have a permanent fear of. I haven't been clean shaven for a very, very long time, basically, and I have a fear of that. But talk to me about kind of Movember, your role there, and the charity itself.
Yeah, fabulous. And look, I love Movember. I think what's really excited me, and I think this is another trend as well, is, I've gone from very commercial profit generating businesses. My last role was, it was owned by the Murdochs, right? So it was all about profit. But really, for me, being able to connect to a purpose that is really important to me as well. I lost an uncle to mental illness. I've lost several friends to mental illness over the years. Far too many, I might like to add, but yeah, several friends and male. I think what Movember is amazing at doing, it's empowering men to have those conversations when it comes to mental health, but it's also the other side of men's health, that testicular cancer, prostate cancer, these things that we, men just soldier
Men aren't very
through,
good
and
at
we don't
talking about
look
that kind of
after
stuff.
ourselves.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's just so important in terms of not only the research that we do, not only where the money goes to try and find a cure, and for those cancers, and improve the health from a scientific perspective, but I think it's the advocacy work that we do, and the visibility of men's health, and really changing the face of what men's health is. And regardless of whether you've got a moustache, it's something that you can participate in any way. We have people that do. Well, there was a guy in the UK actually that drew a giant cock and balls by hiking on his sat nav, right? And he did that to raise money for Movember. There's you can do anything, right? Back in the day when the two, when the fellas set it up and had this idea at the pub to, raise money for men's health, and that was testicular cancer at the time. It was all about the moustache, because moustaches were silly back then. We were all corporate and in suits, and we didn't have them. And, you would see the guys walking down the street and you'd have a good laugh. But now we've all got them, right?
Everyone's got it. Everyone's got it. And it's not just for November as well, right? It's throughout the year. If anybody does want to kind of do anything for Movember, it doesn't have to be in November. It can be all year round. It's just there's a focus on it this month.
That's exactly right. It's our campaign month. It's when you see us everywhere. But it's all year round, and the work doesn't stop. That's the most important thing, November is our big fundraising month. The work does not stop throughout the year. In fact, we even have the Mo Institute. We have a facility where we are funding medical research. It's a really big deal. We're doing amazing work, and men can get a bad rap too. We've got to wrap our arms around our fellas and get them to look after themselves and really make a difference here, right? So workplaces get involved. It's great for social, run an activity. It's great to support a cause as part of your just as part of your culture. We do that, but get behind it. There's so much you can do.
And you know what? And on that note, Eden, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much. As always, we will include all of your details in the show notes. If anybody wants to know more about you, more about Rubber Band, reach out, even a bit more about Movember, they can through that as well. So, Eden, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.